The story begins in the aftermath of a great war, in a city still clinging to the brittle glamour of celluloid dreams. Los Angeles, 1947. This was an age of uneasy peace and rising prosperity, where the shadows felt longer and the promises of Hollywood were often hollow. But for one young woman, Elizabeth Short, the pursuit of that dream would end not with a fade-out, but with a scene of such grotesque violence that it would forever taint the Golden State. The air was already heavy with the promise of a dark fate. Just after 10 a.m. on the morning of January 15, 1947, a mother named Betty Bersinger, pushing a stroller with her 3-year-old daughter, discovered a body in a vacant lot near Leimert Park. Bersinger initially mistook the stark, severed form, its skin pale white against the dusty, overgrown field, for a discarded mannequin. It was posed deliberately, almost theatrically, and entirely drained of blood. The victim, 22-year-old Elizabeth Short. With its gift for the morbid and the lurid, the press quickly christened her the Black Dahlia. This nickname, supposedly inspired by the 1946 film The Blue Dahlia, quickly became synonymous with the brutal, unsolved horror. This was not merely a crime scene. It was a dark, meticulously staged performance designed to shock and to confound. And in a sprawling, booming city that thought it had seen everything, Los Angeles had never seen anything like it. Elizabeth Short's life was defined by the relentless pursuit of an American ideal she could never quite grasp. Born in Massachusetts in 1924, she was a true child of the Depression, marked by hardship early on. When her father, Cleo Short, seemingly abandoned the family after his car was found near a river, a presumed suicide, Elizabeth spent her adolescence dreaming of escaping the cold reality of the East for the sun and promise of California. She was a drifter, constantly moving between Florida and California, drawn to military bases and the ephemeral glamour of uniformed men. Elizabeth had a striking, almost ethereal beauty, dark hair, pale skin, and an arresting figure, often favoring black clothing, which helped cement the later nickname. But her glamour was entirely paper-thin. She was a young woman living a wholly temporary life, relying on the kindness and the wallets of men, often spinning elaborate fictions about her background and prospects. She was never famous, never rich. Just one of thousands of young women hoping to catch a break in a city that preyed on their ambition. In the weeks leading up to her death, Short had been moving from hotel to hotel, last staying in the San Diego area and briefly returning to Los Angeles. Her final known actions place her alive and well in the lobby of the Biltmore Hotel in downtown L.A. on January 9th. She was meeting a traveling salesman named Robert Manley, who later claimed to have dropped her off near the Biltmore, where she was supposedly meeting her sister. 6 days later, her life, which was already transient and unstable, was ended with an act of unimaginable finality. Her fate highlights the dark truth of that glittering age. The city of dreams was also a city of hidden predators, where a young woman could disappear into the shadows without a soul noticing until the horrific end. The nature of the crime scene was immediately catastrophic for the ensuing investigation. The body had not been murdered in that vacant lot. It had been washed, cleaned, and completely drained of blood, suggesting the murder took place elsewhere, clean, enclosed environment where fluids could be managed. The killer was not an amateur. The physical trauma inflicted was extraordinary. The body was bisected, but not in a ragged, amateur manner. Instead, the severing at the abdomen was performed by someone with knowledge of human anatomy, utilizing a technique known as a hemicorporectomy. This surgical precision immediately suggested a perpetrator with medical or butchering skills. Furthermore, the body had been mutilated post-mortem. Chunks of flesh were carved out of her thighs and breasts, and a large, gruesome incision, known as a Glasgow smile, extended from the corners of her mouth across her face, creating a permanent, terrifying grimace. The killer's actions were characterized by calculated, theatrical staging. Elizabeth Short's body was positioned with a shocking symmetry, her arms raised above her head, her legs spread. Her body had been so violently contorted that she looked like a macabre work of modern sculpture. Right next to a sidewalk and near busy homes, the location was a deliberate choice to ensure immediate and maximum public discovery. When the body was identified through fingerprints on file from a previous minor arrest, the press had their star. The Black Dahlia became an instant, morbid celebrity. The sheer brutality of the mutilation and the calculated manner of the display guaranteed that the case would dominate headlines, sensationalism. That would ultimately cripple the investigation. The Los Angeles Police Department was immediately overwhelmed and ill-equipped. In the post-war boom, the city grew faster than its law enforcement could handle. The investigative techniques of 1947 were rudimentary. DNA sequencing was science fiction, and the concepts of crime scene preservation were virtually non-existent. The media's role was truly catastrophic. The Los Angeles Herald-Express and the Los Angeles Examiner engaged in a brutal circulation war, printing every gruesome detail, rumor, and supposed lead they could find, often fabricating facts to sell papers. They actively interfered with the police work, leaking sensitive details and printing letters purportedly sent by the killer, including a chilling package containing Elizabeth Short's cleaned personal documents and an address book. The relentless press coverage turned the victim into a cartoon, distracting police from the actual search for the murderer. This excessive media attention brought about a key disaster: the flood of false confessions. The Black Dahlia became such a fixation in the public imagination that over 500 people called in claiming to be the killer. This required police to dedicate hundreds of person-hours chasing obvious dead ends, clogging up the strained investigative resources. The pressure to solve the case was immense, leading to hasty arrests, forced confessions, and a compromised process that sacrificed investigative integrity for public appeasement. Compounding, this was the failure of the initial evidence collection. Hundreds of journalists, amateur sleuths, and onlookers trampled the crime scene, destroying any minute fibers, soil samples, or tire tracks that might have been present. The police, instead of roping off a large perimeter, allowed the chaos to reign. The lack of reliable forensic science and the destructive hunger of the press ensured that crucial physical evidence necessary to link the crime to a perpetrator would be lost forever. The Black Dahlia case is defined by a deep and often bizarre gallery of suspects, reflecting the hidden, dark underbelly of post-war Los Angeles. The sheer number reflects the case's complexity and the failure of the initial investigation to land on a definitive killer. One of the most persistent and compelling suspects is George Hodel, a respected but eccentric Los Angeles physician. The suspicion was driven mainly in the early 2000s by his son, Steve Hodel, a retired LAPD detective. Steve discovered photographs in his father's belongings that strongly resembled Elizabeth Short and pointed to police recordings from 1950 where officers suspected Hodel of the murder, with one officer reportedly saying, "Supposing I said that you murdered the Black Dahlia?" The fact that Hodel had a surgical background was brilliant, and he abruptly fled to Asia shortly after the investigation, providing ample fuel for speculation. Another prominent figure was Walter Bailey, a wealthy former physician with a mysterious past and a penchant for cruelty, whose ex-wife stated he had confessed to her. Bailey had the surgical knowledge and the means to carry out the murder in a clean environment. The investigation also led to figures within the organized crime world. Leslie Dillon, a bellhop who worked at the Biltmore and was connected to a known murder farm in California, was vigorously pursued by one of the lead detectives, John St. John. The theory suggested the murder was tied to a ring of sex crimes and torture. Even the powerful media establishment was touched. Rumors persisted that the murder was committed by Norman Chandler, son of the publisher of the Los Angeles Times, and that the newspaper intentionally used its immense influence to distract the investigation and protect the family's name. Despite the wealth of suspects, every promising lead eventually dissolved into circumstantial evidence and media rumor. In the absence of definitive forensic linkage, police had to rely on interviews, confessions, and circumstantial chains that always broke under pressure. The true killer had proven to be one step ahead, blending back into the populace of the sprawling city. The Black Dahlia murder was never officially solved. The LAPD remains insistent that the case is still open, but the crucial physical evidence is long gone, lost to time and to the chaotic failures of the initial weeks. The true legacy of the Black Dahlia murder is not the killer's identity, but the profound effect it had on American culture and law enforcement. The case became the darkest archetype of the film noir era, a world of cynicism, broken dreams, and ultimate betrayal. It solidified the image of Los Angeles as a place of surface glamour concealing deep moral corruption. More practically, the case served as a brutal, embarrassing wake-up call for the LAPD. The investigative failures, from the contamination of the crime scene to the chasing of false confessions, directly contributed to the slow, painful modernization of police procedure in the post-war era. It underscored the desperate need for professionalization and standardized forensic practice. The Dahlia remains a historical ghost, demanding we confront the limitations of justice in a time before DNA, integrated databases, and a proper understanding of the modern, organized predator. It is the ultimate historical cold case, a permanent black mark on the terror timeline. It is a cautionary tale, proving that even the most sensational and highly publicized crimes can slip through the fingers of justice when the investigative age is not ready to catch a monster walking among them. The darkness of 1947 still lingers. But by bringing these case files to light, we ensure the victim, Elizabeth Short, is not forgotten. This is the Dark Age. The truth is always buried in the details.